Hello, everybody, and welcome to a bonus episode of the Winging It Formula One podcast. There have been so many topics of discussion coming out of Silverstone that we are going to give you this little bumper moment to enjoy us more and our weird opinions. I'm Freddie Coates. I'm here with Adam Dickinson and Nigel Chu to discuss the 2022 car and sprint qualifying in this very fun little chat. Adam, how are you doing?
Good, I think. I mean, to be fair, last year we do these like intra-race episodes anyway on weekends where there wasn't a race on. So the fact that this is considered a bonus is just a slacking, really. But yeah,
we're busier now.
I'm good. I don't know. Think it feels like it's getting slightly cooler here. So fingers crossed that continues, because I've just been walking around in the lightest t-shirt that I own, with all the curtains drawn in the house, trying to keep cool. So yeah, hopefully that comes to an end sooner rather than later.
Sod's law is when this gets published, it's raining everywhere and we've got flooding happening and stuff like that. But anyway, Nigel, how are you going?
If it was this heat with rain, that'd be fantastic.
It'd be like Malaysia.
It's not. Yeah, fantastic.
Nigel, tell us how you are, quick.
Good, very good. Looking forward to the Olympics. Four nations and the Isle of Man. So yeah, it's going to be exciting. We're going to get second in the medal table. We're not. We're probably going to get fourth.
Those of you
looking forward to the Olympics.
Nigel Chu's bingo card. That's the Isle of Man slander you can tick off today.
All those Olympians from the Isle of Wight are really annoyed right now.
I like the Isle of Dogs, but they don't have dog racing in the Olympics.
Unlike the Isle of Man, so that's the difference there. Even though the Isle of Man's right next to like my house. But yeah, anyway, let's go.
Do you live in a shed like 5 meters off the coast of the island?
Yeah, it just floats around depending on the wind direction down the North Sea, not the North, Irish Sea.
Irish Sea, not the North Sea. That's just oil rigs.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. The 2022 car is going to be what we discussed later on.
Before we started with the sprint, Freddie.
That's why I said discuss later on.
Right.
I just run away for cover.
Oh, God.
Nigel, what are we going to talk about next? I don't know. Is it the sprint race or the sprint qualifying or just F1 sprint? Whatever you want to call it, it happened. We still don't really know what it's called, but it happened on Saturday afternoon at Silverstone, and I liked it. Adam, give me your one word to describe how you felt about sprint qualifying, race sprint qualifying, the race sprint on Saturday. And feel now, actually. You don't have to do how you felt on Saturday.
Start with S and end in T.
Yeah, you can't say
subsequent.
You can't say sunburned.
As I expected, but with like dashes between each, between the words.
Hyphenated, I get that.
Yeah.
Nigel, is your one word hyphenated?
No.
Different words. Okay, that's
every
good.
Word could be hyphenated, to be fair, in a way.
God, you can tell we're written journalists.
Yeah. So, all right. That's my summary.
Oh, cool. Okay. Do you care to expand on all right?
It's kind of like, it's what I expected. We had Friday evening qualifying was fantastic, especially with Hamilton, home crowd there. George Russell played a big part too. But then the race, I think that's as good as it gets for a sprint race. You know, we had a great battle for the lead for the first 9 corners without a crash. And then we had Fernando Alonso going from 11th to 5th. And then he kind of made it exciting. We had Perez's spin. But I think that's kind of peak sprint race. I think at Monza and whether USA or Brazil, whichever wherever the third one will be, I just don't see how it becomes more exciting than what we got at Silverstone. And if that's like peak excitement, I don't know if it's good or bad. I think 3 races is just about enough for me.
Yeah, I think I agree that Friday qualifying was fantastic. I really enjoyed that. I like Friday night sport. Anyway, it's just, like kind of less of it. But, you kind of come to the end of the week and then you can just, it's just a nice relaxing evening. And kind of, the 3-dayedness of it was good as well. And I think the sprint race kind of, it, like Nigel says, there were the two interests of the opening lap battle and then Alonso, but there wasn't much doing outside of that. But also kind of how much do we think it affected the race? Because I think particularly in the Hamilton Verstappen battle, it did have
100%.
an impact there. So it's kind of how much you judged that as part of its success and failure. And I think that
is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think to me adds an interesting dynamic. I think it's good.
I don't know if it. Yeah, I think it's good if it affects it, but I don't think it's the biggest deal if the race changes massively. Like the way the race happens changes massively because of the sprint, if that makes sense. I mean, they get more knowledge from a practice session than they would the sprint, you could say, because they can only really do sort of one. If you see it as like a practice thing, it's only really like one run, essentially, isn't it? 17 laps, rather than lots of different trials they could do in an hour.
But it's up against competitors on a live
it's up against competitors
track, which is what
put racing drivers in a race and they'll race. And I think we saw that. I think people didn't really expect. A lot of people were sort of saying there won't be those like kind of risks and stuff, but I think there were risks with it. And like Alonso's start was at the start where the cars are closer together, there were lots of risks being taken. It's just the nature of modern Formula One, I think, that meant that nothing much really happened afterwards. And you get that with pretty much the majority of races. I don't really think the sprint is what changed that. So that's what kind of keeps me sort of more positive and optimistic about it for the future. Because I think if 22 goes as planned, which we'll get onto later, then a sprint could be arguably better. I know Nigel's going to basically say that everything is bad and we're all going to die because of Formula One 2022 regulations, and that I should be upset about everything. But like, I think there's potential there, and I don't think it's perfect, but I think I'll take it over a practice session any day, really, at certain tracks.
I think my biggest problem is that it doesn't make qualifying meaningless, but it takes away quite a bit of, I don't know what you call it. It takes away quite a bit from qualifying, and I think that's my biggest problem. I'd say.
Do you think it should become more of a race in its own right then? Like rather than 3-2-1 points, I don't know, like 10-6, 4-3-2-1 or something like that, just to make it more of a race than less of a qualifying idea.
I think for me,
I feel like
you need a pit stop. You need a pit stop, but I don't know if that makes it too long and people get annoyed about that. But I think you need a pit stop to make it a race, an F1 race.
I mean, one thing about qualifying was that they forced them to all be on the soft tyres. Would you think that would be better for a sprint race, or do you think the tyre variability is what actually helped it this time?
I just to jump in on that, I think they could do with giving them softer tyres, kind of maybe softer tyres than even they provide for the race, because I think then you get that kind of it's a really difficult thing to get the balance right for.
Tyre saving and
it would just change it to a endurance kind of sprint.
But that's what I was going to go on to, and it's hard to get the balance right. But if you can get it right, where it's you either have to kind of go into uber tyre managing mode to get through, or you can pit and go ham for 2 stints. I think that would really add to it, because then you get that difference in strategy, and I think that would add to it. Like I say, it's difficult to get the balance right, but if you can, I think that would be a good thing.
How long's an F2 feature race? It's about 2/3 of an F1 race distance, isn't it?
It is with slower cars.
Yeah, so I think something like that with a pit stop and then having the more points, I think that's what I would lean towards. I would say,
there's a worry
if we're going to have an extra race.
Do you think there's a worry that that's not different enough? Though, that's what I would say to that. I think the whole sort of idea of the sprint isn't necessarily to have an extra qualifying. I think the idea of it is just to do something different to the race, but that's still got potential to be relatively entertaining. And like, we can't look at this and say, oh, well, it was a bit boring after a few bits, because you get that with normal Grand Prix. It's not like that's the sacred ground that we need to judge it against. It really. So I kind of feel like that in every sort of way that an F1 race happens, there's potential and for it to go in an entirely different way from every lap. And most of the time, these drivers are managing, so it's entirely different. I think a lot of the drivers post the sprint said that, I think Leclerc and Norris definitely said this, that they found that harder than an ordinary race because they weren't able to back off in a way to conserve tyres because they had to be consistently pushing. And I feel like that's a kind of interesting way to have racing, because we haven't had that since 2009 with refueling, and it gives a whole new sort of take. And I think if you have that new take but have the main race as we sort of have it, I think that's all right for me. And don't do it at Barcelona, but Silverstone, Monza, Spa, those kind of places might be all right.
I think I'd agree with that. I don't really feel like you can add too much more into the sprint race. Like I think the points allocation is as much as it needs to be. I think it's kind of.
I think a fastest lap point that can be from P1 to P10, even with the 3-2-1, might be interesting or not.
Yeah, but I mean, like overall, I don't think if you're giving like more points for. If you give more points to the top 10 or the top 8 or whatever in the sprint race, that just seems to be kind of too rewarding of race pace, because effectively if you've got the fastest car, you can be on for, potentially like 35 points over the weekend.
I mean, it's still, if it's still a third of a race and you offer a third of the points, arguably that's worth it.
Nah, because I just don't think it really needs it. I think if you're gonna put more points on offer, that's just not really. That's becoming like too much part of the championship. Whereas I think it should be part of the.
It is part of the championship. You think it should be? So yeah, I get what you're saying, and I think it should be part of the weekend. It makes those points at the end of the weekend harder to get to, and I think that's better. I think that's more interesting. I think that's kind of what you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I feel like if you're going to market it as sprint qualifying, it should just be like that as part of the weekend, different way to, set the grid and create, I guess, more action for the fans to watch, especially as you said, if it's like the exciting tracks that you mentioned. But I don't feel like they should be putting another kind of championship event in where like serious kind of ramifications for the points totals. I just don't really think F1 needs that. I think that's too much for me anyway.
I think you've convinced me of it. I think I'm on board for free sprint events a year. I think you have actually convinced me with your argument. Because
I thought you said you were already anyway.
Well, I don't know. Because especially with what I've said in the past about having different formats throughout the year and stuff, and this could be one of them. Yeah. I think it's done. It's probably done just about enough for me to be a format 3 or 4 times a year at right circuits, I'd say.
I'm open to having the normal format, having the sprint format. I don't know, having sort of, because lots of people sort of say, oh, make them use all 3 compounds in a race. I think that would be cool in a race like Monaco, where you don't have much overtaking. I think if you say at this race you have to use 3 compounds, at this race you don't have to do any pit stops if you want to. I think they could just completely go up with that and just throw it out.
Have like one lap shootout at Monaco, like do the normal Q1, Q2, then have the top 10 go out
shootout.
1 by 1.
Well, they do that in Texas, actually.
Stafford versus,
You've got one gunslinger riding on board.
Texas Motor Speedway.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think to me the main thing was that I don't think it took away from the race. I think it was that, it was an extra excitement, like you say, over over a practice session, which we would have had. It was better than that. But I don't think, as I said, I think it added to the race with the way it played out on the first lap between Verstappen and Hamilton, because there could be a potentially massive sliding door scenario if they don't have that. And that's kind of it. I think at tracks like Silverstone, where it is going to be, there's potential for it to be 7 laps of excitement, rather than just. I know we had a good race at Paul Ricard this year, but if we'd had it, the last few times we've been there, it'd just be, another 17 laps of tedium. I
think the way this year's championship is, I kind of think any format would work anyway, just because of how close Red Bull and Mercedes are. I'm not sure if it's the format that made it work or whether it's the title fight that made it work. And with Hamilton being on home turf, Verstappen on not the enemy soil, but the guy against him at Silverstone.
Yeah.
So I kind of think that was more of a factor than the sprint itself, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think I agree with what you're saying. It didn't take away from the race. I think it only added to the race.
Because I imagine this format in when Mercedes dominated.
Yeah, it would have just been an extra opportunity for Mercedes to dominate. But you can say that about any format, like you say. I think even with qualifying in the race and what we're saying doesn't take away from the race. Imagine that format with Mercedes dominating.
Yeah.
It's always dependent on the cars on track and that kind of thing. But I don't think the sprint was a bad thing, and I think it's got potential to be a good thing. And I think
we've only seen it once as well.
Exactly, you've only seen it once. I really enjoyed qualifying on the Friday evening. Adam's been to the future. I really enjoyed basically having two race starts essentially, and we got a third because of the red flag. But I thought that was fun, and I did put a tweet out today. It might be interesting to see the first ever race of the 2022 cars being a sprint race, and I think more because they'd have no practice going to the qualifying, and then they'd have to do a sprint race, so they've absolutely got to rag these cars. They've got to push them, and they have no idea what's going to happen in the race as well. I think that'd be very exciting. Be it at Bahrain, be it at Melbourne, Albert Park,
or Ricard, first race of the year,
or Ricard. But yeah, I think that'd be interesting, and I'm open for many more formats to come in weird and wonderful ways. To be honest, because why not point something at it and shake a stick, that kind of thing.
One more thing which I think is worth touching on is the Perez factor, because he was the big loser of the sprint race.
Yeah.
In terms of he then started at the back the next one and basically just wasn't a factor in the, and again we kind of don't know whether Hamilton had won if he'd had to go through, have Perez to overtake as well, or whether he would have been in that position even. But I think that was something that really, really had a kind of massive effect on it. And as I say, he was the main casualty. If it weren't for the Verstappen Hamilton collision, that would probably be the main storyline, or one of the kind of main features of it.
And some people were saying like, oh, look at this, it's put Perez out of the race, this sprint and that kind of stuff. It was a bit like, well, that's just a thing, isn't it? If he spun out of qualifying,
Perez put himself out of the race.
Yeah, exactly. And no one else spun out in the way that he did. It's just that's the thing. It's more competition, and more competition I like, to be honest. But moving on to we're gonna have more sprint rounds. They haven't officially been confirmed as Monza and another one, but
Monza's been confirmed.
Has Monza been confirmed?
Yeah.
Monza's been confirmed, but
then USA or Brazil.
USA or Brazil. It looks like USA is probably the only one of those that's going to actually take place. So probably USA then. And USA probably would be all right for it, actually. But yes, we're going to move on to the other topic that came out of Silverstone, which is the 2022 car, because Formula One have revealed a mock-up of the mock-up they revealed a year ago, which, I mean, I didn't really think was news, but they've done a pretty good promo stuff on it and convinced us to talk about it here. So, we're going to talk about the 2022 car because, to be fair, a lot of it still feels a bit of an unknown, and we're only 6 months away from the start of next year, really. So, from when they're probably really close to being launched. So, what are your guys' impressions on what 2022 will bring to us? I'll go to Adam first because I feel like you'll be a bit more measured than Nigel.
Well, I'd firstly like to say, why on earth did they do it in back of CD colour? Like, literally any other colour in the entire world would have been better than that. But no, they're just like, oh, we're just going to make it really shiny. So, like, any camera shot that isn't perfectly judged for the exposure, it just looks, like, unreadable. So I hated that. Outside of that, I saw a picture of a duckbill platypus with a front wing on, and it basically looked really similar to the car. So it kind of, I think, I don't know if I'm sold on how it looks, but like we'll get used to that anyway when it's painted a normal colour. and that's probably one of the reasons why I'm not sold on it yet, because I kind of still don't know how to judge it. And yeah, outside of that, like it's a mock-up of the car. It looks okay, but we don't know until they whack an engine in it and paint it normal colour and go racing.
I like it. I think it looks quite good. It looks quite big, but I don't think it's actually bigger than the current cars. And I think hopefully the wheelbase will stay the same. But I quite like the look of it.
Same width, which I think is the worst bit. I think if it was thinner, but yeah.
Yeah. And if it does what they're saying, which is to decrease the turbulent air by 80%, or I can't remember the figure, 85%, then I'm all for it. And I think it looks okay. I like the bigger tyres as well. I know that's split opinion, but I'm a fan of the bigger tyres. I quite like that. I don't know why. But yeah, I think it looks good in terms of aesthetics. So yeah.
I'm on the same.
No, you go.
Oh, sorry. I'm on the same side with Nigel. I think it looks good. I think there are a few bits of it that will be sort of ironed out by the teams, because I think they've put the reason the nose is so wide on this one is because they're upping the crash structure and structural loads required at the front of the car. And an easy way to do that in a mock-up is just make it bigger. But Formula One teams will make it thinner, and at the front of the car will not look like that when a Formula One team gets on it, particularly probably by the end of the year in 2022. It will be a thinner nose because that's what they like. And I think the rear wing is something very interesting. And I think you can kind of, I think what I like about it is you can sort of see how they're making the cars race with it. And it's sort of making aerodynamics for racing quite understandable on the surface. I think that's a really, really core thing for Formula One to grapple with, because a lot of the time they sort of go, oh, look at aerodynamics, it happened, and don't really do anything about it. But this is, I think, a really interesting way of making sort of the science part of the racing, but doing it in a sort of a pop culture kind of way. And I don't know, I quite like the back of CD colour when I saw it, because they had it at Silverstone. It looked quite good. I thought the worst bit was the way they did the red on the halo. I thought that made it look much worse, in my opinion, because it had some weird stripes on that.
Yeah, with the rear wing, I 100% agree. I'm not sure how DRS is going to work. That's one thing that really confused me. I'm not sure how the slot.
Yeah,
they've said it's going to be there, but Sam Collins did a video with it and said it's not actually on that model of car. So I don't know how they're going to do it yet. But that, I guess we'll see what comes. Who knows? Maybe they'll sack it off and meet with the day before the race.
You know what? If it works as planned, I would love it if DRS wasn't there, because that means they've done a really good job. That means we'll get better natural racing, I guess. But I think in terms of
and they're quietly confident as well.
It means it's done the job.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I like the wheel covers, and when the tyres first came in, I wasn't really a fan of them in the F2, but I kind of don't. I don't know. It doesn't look as noticeable on the rendering they did, so hopefully that's the case. But yeah, it looks very futuristic. Is like my thing. It's kind of it. You know, you sometimes see, or I do because I'm sad, these concept liveries or concept cars on Instagram Discover, and it's kind of it just looks like one of those really. It looks like, you know, it really futuristic, and I always think it's really difficult to imagine what, like the current crop, whether it's like F1 cars or road cars or anything, it always feels really difficult to kind of imagine what they'll look like in the future, because they just look like so modern now. But with this, it does look, it kind of looks like it is from the future, so that's cool.
And I think it's interesting that the teams are saying that they're not going, that what they actually make won't look too different to what we saw last week at Silverstone. So I think that's a good thing as well, because sometimes they make these things, then when they actually come out, they look completely different. It's not what we expect. So I think that's
the 2014 cars were meant to have 5 wheels, so
they did a steering wheel. But there were a few teams
ball bearing wheels as well, actually. So
lots of wheels. A few teams apparently said on sort of behind hands to each other, ours looks nothing like that, and a few have sort of come out and gone, ours does look a bit like that. So I think There's going to be a few interpretations that we'll see. And I think, but that's what you have to expect. Like, look at 2009, which is when there was probably the biggest overhaul in technical regulations in terms of the way the style of the car was to the previous one. Like, you look at the nose on the Red Bull that year in comparison to like the nose on the Renault. The nose on the Renault was a box, and the nose on the Red Bull was really a thin, sleek thing. And so, yeah, there's going to be some differentiation, which is going to be exciting. And I think, it's really hard to sort of picture what the teams will come up with anyway, because like they could do something so radically different. There's still that scope there, I think, because Formula One teams just do that out of nowhere. They're just bonkers with the way they can change it up. But this, I don't know if the people behind it kind of convinced me on the stats, like you say, Nigel, the stats about reducing downforce to the car behind. It says the current one, if you're within sort of a car length, that'll be 50% downforce lost, and they're saying now it will be something like only like just under 20% downforce lost if you're in a car length. So that if that does pay off, and I think they've been quite candid about saying we'll make sure the teams pay attention to that, then who knows? But if that works, I'll be very happy.
It's the first set of regulations that I'm aware of that have targeted, like purely targeted better racing, wheel-to-wheel racing. And I think, having Ross Brawn there is a very good thing as well, because he's seen it all over the decades. So it is exciting. I think literally any team could go to the front as well, and we don't know who that will be. But I genuinely think there is hope that we'll get some of the best wheel-to-wheel racing we've ever seen in F1. And we think this year's been great already. Well, next year, if the championship is close, then on the track it could be even better, which is just really exciting to think of.
And kind of linked to that, you could get new kind of rivalries as well, which I think you could get drivers kind of in the further back who've not had that chance to be kind of involved in the battle, the kind of Hamilton Verstappen, Hamilton Rosberg, Vettel battle at the top of the sport that could. And that's like there was in 2009. I think that will be really exciting to see if it does come about.
I'm very happy we're not going to have teams spending themselves out with problems and stuff like that. And keeping it that kind of thing where it's kind of like it's a fair fight for everyone. I think that, coupled with development of this car only being allowed to start under the cost cap, and the fact that we're going to have the wind tunnel, usage being staggered for teams that perform and teams that don't perform in the constructors, means that it's going to be a lottery so far, and like it's brilliant. I'm really, really excited for it.
And also, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, and that's what I live for.
And also the way this year's championship has gone, with Mercedes and Red Bull going at it, hammer and tong every single weekend, that they want to keep on. Like, they probably plan to stop developing their cars by now, but they say they're still going to bring a few more small things. Red Bull plan to bring some more things, definitely. So that might help an Alpine or Ferrari or someone like that to jump to the front, because these two heavyweight teams have been in an arms race for longer than they wanted. So I think that's exciting as well. So it's the timing of it has kind of worked as well somehow.
The pandemic's actually slightly helped it in a way.
Yeah.
Because it means that the big teams aren't developing this car before the cost cap. They've got the cost cap. We've discussed this before, but the cost cap has come in before the development of the car. And that's, it's a bit of a silver lining for all the stuff that's happened recently.
I think the flip side is, if we kind of turn up to the first race next year after the season we've had this year, and Aston Martin are just 2 seconds ahead of everyone else, that's going to feel like really disappointing.
But it's all right, because the driver lineup will Claude and back, so it'll be all right.
But I think, I don't know. It's
there is that risk. That's true.
It all looks great now, but the teams will be going over these regulations already with the fine tooth comb, looking for holes. And yes, Ross Brawn's kind of been there and done that in terms of looking for them, but that was the say with Bernie Ecclestone when he was at the top. So yeah,
he wasn't a technical director of a Formula One team who famously exploited every grey area they could in Ferrari. To be fair, he was just the guy who bought Gordon Murray, was Bernie Ecclestone. And that's what made his cars good.
If it doesn't work under Brawn, then it will never work.
What do teams do is if they go, right, you make the front of the car good for racing, the teams will say, okay, we'll make the back of the car awful for the car behind. That's what they're going to do. They're racing teams, and you've got to, they're all going to fight. But again, we're still here watching it now. We're not going to look at that and go, wow, they're not racing really well like they said they would. It's awful, because we still watch races at Sochi. So, and we do podcasts about them. So Adam does a podcast about a race he hasn't even watched, but that's the kind of nerdiness we get to. So I don't think it's going to overly change the way we are with it. But
to be fair,
hopefully it works for the global perception of F1 and makes it a fight.
The Russian Grand Prix is one of the ones I have watched live, so it kind of doesn't really work. But anyway.
Anyway, that's it for our kind of short little bonus episode we're doing. Bit of nice little easy chat in a hot evening in the UK from us. Hope you've enjoyed it. You can follow us on Twitter at WingingItF1, where you will occasionally get one of us taking a pot shot of the other anonymously.
I haven't done that for a while.
We haven't done that for a while, but I've probably spurred it on now. And you can follow us all in our individual Twitters. I'm at FredCoates1999. Adam's at Adam Dickinson01. Nigel's at Nigel C. Journer. You can see us taking pot shots at the world in general, or ourselves, or trying to share things we've done and wanting praise. So please go and give us praise. We are fickle human beings who simply love praise and want to be loved. Please love us. Thank you so much for taking the... I'll go and troll Nigel then. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to us, and have a good day for yourselves. Enjoy everything. Goodbye,
See you
guys.
before Hungary.